Hello, friends of Studio Brule. This is Steve Brule, and it is coffee time where I go over some of the things that come across my desk and grab my attention over the last day or two. Welcome to the show. Hi, Michael. I see you first commenting in the comments section there. Sorry for the mix-up in the last one where you seemed to get stuck out of the stream and I was late starting. You can see my VIP club member to the patriarchy, which authorized me to comment on the evil comings and goings of the evil feminist empire that extends its thousands of tentacles all around the world. So without any further ado, the big issue today, and the reason why I thought I should have a live stream today, is the election. And it's tomorrow. This is the big one we've been waiting for all year, and it's been a long, long build-up with the crazy Democratic primaries and the long campaigning, mostly campaigning by Trump, as Biden spent most of his campaign trail apparently hiding in his mother's basements, as they say. But he's out there today making a complete fool of himself. Let's just hope. Well, as you know, everyone here knows that I'm rooting for Trump, primarily because the Democrats are a feminist party and they're trying to lead the U.S. into a one world government and a socialist government. So let's have a look at a couple of the articles that I've highlighted here. And these are by no means the only. I mean, there's a pile of articles that's been coming out on this election season since this, pile of articles. These are the ones that stuck in my mind. And there's a theme that will be of no surprise to anybody here, and that's that the mainstream media is protecting Biden and hiding Trump's achievements and attacking Trump. It's so blatantly obvious, and this is probably the most important issue of this entire election season in many ways. And it is how this election has revealed in no uncertain terms. We can't back away from this. This is pure and proven that big tech and the mainstream media are on board pushing for socialism, pushing for left-wing politics, pushing for, fundamentally, a one-world government, because that's where the leftist one-world politics leads to, one-world government. And I've dealt with that in the video at the 21 convention, and it's on my channel right now. So let's have a look at this. I think this is a tweet from Larry Elder. This is the kind of thing that the left-wing media, which is most of the media in the US and in the world, in fact, is trying to hide and from the public and downplay Trump's successes. And there's a lot of successes. Here we're seeing, and this is coming a tweet from Larry Elder. I find this quite interesting, and I'll read it out to you. Where but America can a female Supreme Court justice with 2 black kids get sworn in by a black Supreme Court justice only to have Democrats pronounce her racist? Unbelievable. The left-wing media and the Democrats, they're not connected with reality in any form. Of course, they've sworn off any resemblance of reality as soon as they've signed into the feminist movement, which is one big steaming pile of evil lies, starting from 1848 and before. So when you start with lies, you're going to end up with lies, and you're going to end up totally disconnected from reality. And that's where these people are today. What is absolutely astonishing is that they have any support at all from any citizen in the US. But they do. And that is a cautionary tale for the rest of us who want to keep our feet firmly planted in reality while we hope for a better future and build for a better future. Let's move on a little bit here. This is one of the things I wanted to highlight, that the reasons why the left-wing media, and I'm going to get to what they're focusing on in a minute, but it is about hiding and downplaying Trump's successes. Here is something that came out. Oh, I think this was supposed to be on the next page. Let me just move forward a bit. Yeah, this is supposed to be on the next one. Let me just put this over. for 1 second here. Just bear with me. I'm just making an adjustment in one of the slides here that I'm going to talk about. So here is one. Thank you so much to Oklahoma Bachelor for your generous support of Studio Brule. And Oklahoma Bachelor says, I have zero faith in this world, so wasn't going to vote, but I will vote for Trump because I want a future for my son. Prep food on me. Thank you so much, Oklahoma Bachelor. Yeah, even if you're not a strong Republican, you should vote for Trump in order to at least buy us some more time to prepare for the onslaught of a one world government and the terrible things that's going to mean for humanity. Let's read this title from the Times of Israel. Trump, up to 10 countries set for a peace deal with Israel, largely after the elections. This is in the Times of Israel, but I don't think this was reported anywhere in the mainstream media. Up to 10 countries. 5, I think, so far. It says here, President claims there are 5 Middle East definites and a similar number who are pretty much ready to open diplomatic relations with Israel. Nobody in their wildest of hopeful dreams would have claimed that this was going to be possible in one 4-year election cycle. But here it is right in front of our eyes. And this was reported only about 5 days ago in Israel Times, and not a word of it in the mainstream media in the US or in Canada for that matter. Let's read this here, a selection from that article. Yeah, Michael, I'm going to just respond to what you're saying there. Yes, I know I'm having trouble with this mic because last time I put it on manual sound and it was overblown and I couldn't seem to trim it back. So I put this one time on automatic sound level in the StreamYard setting. So we'll see how it goes throughout this session. But let me read this, and if you can read this with me today. U.S. President Donald Trump said Tuesday that there are up to 10 countries that he expects to soon normalize relations with Israel, but that the developments would largely happen after next week's presidential elections. Asked if there were more countries in the Middle East that would follow the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and Sudan, who all recently opened diplomatic relations with Israel, Trump said that there were more on the way without specifying exactly how many or which countries they were. So this is huge news. This is enormous news, and it's not being reported on. And because it is coming up in the election, and of course, the left-wing media and the left-wing big tech companies hate Trump. And we'll get into the tech companies soon too. Let's read this from Fox News. Trump's latest Mideast peace deal buried by ABC, CBS, NBC, and Sand Dune. I'm not sure. In Sand Dune. Okay, just burying it there, sticking their heads in the sand, that kind of imagery. This was reported just a couple of days ago by Fox News, and of course it's no secret to anybody here. And this fact sheet come out from, I think this is a government website. President Trump brokers a historic peace agreement between Israel and Sudan, October 23rd. And here, Donald Trump tweeting out, and he has to use Twitter because the mainstream media are so filled with hate, and they aren't doing their job of representing the news. And there was an article on that just recently in the last few days that this is the biggest news item of our day. The news media, the mainstream, are protecting Biden. They aren't asking him tough questions, even when he's running for office. How much worse will these same media players be if Biden, by some unfortunate stroke of horrible luck for humanity, makes his way to the White House? They will not question or investigate anything that his group of thieves and thugs are doing in the world, or for the US for that matter. That's a big warning signal there. So Trump says, huge win today for the United States and for peace in the world. Sudan has agreed to a peace and normalization agreement with Israel, with the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain, that's 3 Arab countries, to have done so in only a matter of weeks. More will follow. By any account, this is huge news, and yet it is entirely ignored for the most part by the mainstream media. Only more fair media are covering this. And what does the New York Times choose to focus on? We've got a new Supreme Court judge who was absolutely treated horribly by the media and by the Democrats throughout the vetting process. And she got sworn in. She's a Catholic. She's a mother of 7. She has 2 black kids. She made it to the Supreme Court of the U.S. Big, huge news. What does New York, this is a success for Trump and a success for women, especially conservative-minded women. What does the New York Times focus on? U.S. reports more than 500,000 cases in a week, a record, as the Trump administration says it ended the pandemic. They are flying up the fear-mongering about the coronavirus scamdemic. 500,000 new cases. Do you folks remember that not about 6, I think it's 2 months ago. 2 months ago, the CDC had to publish a correction saying 94% of the so-called deaths due to coronavirus were actually people who died with comorbid issues. But before we get to that, let me just read a little sample from this. Why did this not pull up? I didn't get one up here, so let's just get this sample from the article. The U.S. has reported a record daily average of 71,000 new cases over the past week. This is what the New York Times is focusing on instead of the historic peace deals, unprecedented. If you combine all of the peace deal successes of my lifetime from U.S. administrations, it wouldn't add up to what's been going on in the past 4 weeks or 10 weeks here in the U.S. And yet they're focusing on the scamdemic. An increase of about 40% from the average 2 weeks earlier. 20 states, including Illinois, have recorded their highest 7-day average of new cases, and 3 states in Tennessee, Wisconsin, and Oklahoma have set a record 7-day average for deaths. On Tuesday, Oklahoma and Wyoming broke single-day death records, and Kentucky reported a new daily cases record. And yet, the statistics for the yearly deaths in the U.S., in fact, they have gone down slightly. I forgot to screen cap that, but every year there's statistics on the total numbers of deaths per year in the U.S. And I forget the numbers, but it's a sizable number. And this year, 2020, averaged out, prorated for over the year, is less than last year and is in line with the normal fluctuations of deaths that occur every single year in the U.S. No increase. The really important question that is in fact left out of every article from these left-wing nonsense fearmongers is that where are all the predicted increases of deaths? There are none. There are none because COVID-19 has not really registered on the yearly death rates at all. The only thing different is that we are calling every other kind of death, all kinds of other deaths with comorbidities, people who are dying from other things anyways, they're registering them as COVID-19, specifically for the purpose of news articles like this to stir up fear in the population. Remember, these are the left-wing media people who have been trying to stir up fear over climate change for 40 years. Well, 30 at least in heavy-duty measure. And they have not been able to get the public sufficiently afraid to get them into a lockdown and control the public. And along comes COVID-19, and what do? Every death from every illness, if it can be any way justified, and even if it can't, is listed as COVID-19. And unfortunately, enormous numbers of people are eating this up. It's like people want to be afraid. Same reason maybe people go to see horror movies. They want to be afraid. People are believing this nonsense. And of course, the media, like the New York Times, is happy to sell it to you because it distracts from Trump's, why is this not shutting down? There we go. Trump's successes in the lead up to this, one of the most important elections in my lifetime. So this is the headline they choose to run with. Let's move on a bit. And here, this is not the US, but it's the same in Canada as the US. There's not a remarkable difference between the two cultures. Well, there are, but the trajectory of the disease, such as it is about the same in Canada and the US. And what does Calgary News determine? And this is played out at every one of these temporary hospitals and field sites that they've set up. The field hospital set up for COVID-19 in Calgary hasn't seen one single patient with the illness. Now, if that field hospital had been in the US, they would be following the CDC's insistence that every and any deaths shall be attributed to COVID-19 if there's any possible way to do it. And they've provided something like $45,000 of incentive to every hospital for every death recorded as COVID-19. 40 or 45,000 extra dollars. Imagine that, folks. And they want us to believe the statistics when they were incentivizing is right through the roof. Incredible, but this is the world we're living in right now. And this is from October 25th. Not one patient. Here, back in August 31st, 2 months ago, barely over 2 months ago, the CDC had to release a report that 94% of COVID-19 deaths in the US had contributing conditions. That's code word for dying with the disease, not of the disease. That means these people were sick and they would have died if they caught the common cold. Now, that's a terrible thing too. I don't wish anybody to be dying for any reason, but the reality of life is we're all going to die of one thing or another. And the point is that there is a political motivation. There's a political reason for stirring up this massive hysterical fear in the West. It's insane. We should be furious about this. The entire Western all of the citizens of the Western world should be furious about this. They're lying to us through the teeth. They're manipulating us in unprecedented ways. Fact check. Now, these links. This is from Reuters. These links are all in the description of the video. You can go and check out all this stuff if you like to. They are going into some detail in this article, and it's worth reading. They make a few good points. It doesn't change the fact that it doesn't change the fact that COVID-19 deaths are extraordinarily, grotesquely overestimated for political motivations. But in this article, they talk about what comorbidity means, and in some of those, the actual number of deaths due directly to COVID-19 only are 6%, but there are some probably legitimate number, a gray area in there in which the disease did in fact push somebody over the edge. That is very different than dying of COVID-19 still. So let's move on to the next topic. And this is why they are not reporting on Trump's successes, and they are reporting on everything but. This is an excellent article, and I tweeted this and posted it on Facebook earlier. The elites have closed ranks. The suppression of the Hunter Biden scandal is an alarming abuse of the tech monopoly's power. I am absolutely fed up with these tech companies. They have abused our faith. When I started, this is a little bit of an aside, but when I first started at the YouTube channel in 2012 after the Warren Farrell protest, I was actually very excited. I thought this was the legit democratization of media, where actual people getting an actual voice and a capacity, if they can muster it, the ability to reach the world, to put your point of view out, to challenge the mainstream media. YouTube was good back then. YouTube did offer us, and they backed us up. But YouTube is absolutely corrupt to the core now with its feminist CEO. And all of the tech companies have proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that they are manipulative, con artists, globalist leftists who want to create a one world government and push everyone, the regular people, into a slave working class. Amazon's profits almost 200% up this year or something like this, while small businesses all around the country are going out of business, bankruptcy. These guys are laughing their way to the bank while they try to push governments to extend the lockdown so that they can even increase their incredible wealth even more. This is shameful what's going on today. Makes you understand why there were grassroots revolutions, bloody grassroots revolutions in the past. It certainly makes you understand how it can happen. Let's read this quote from that article. But the attempts to suppress the story have revealed the totalitarian impulses of those who hold a near monopoly on the flow of information and on whose behalf they are willing to exercise their power. Imagine if they get their bought and sold puppet candidate into the White House. Imagine that. There's no stopping them. The one world government will be ushered in as quickly as you can change your pants. It's unbelievable. We're seeing Orwell's worst nightmare transforming right before our eyes. And reading onward here. It has been more than 2 weeks since the Post broke its story, and is still locked out of its Twitter account, meaning that America's oldest daily newspaper is forbidden from sharing any of its articles. This is really incredible, but I think Twitter has backed down on this because of the enormous backlash to their obvious loss of credibility in this story. This story was well researched into the Biden corruptions and scandals. And Twitter tried to suppress it in the weeks leading up to the most important election. I mean, how much more do we need to know? We need a president in there who's going to go head on and smash those big tech companies into smithereens, split them up, punish them, investigate everything and every memo in those companies and see if they can bring those tyrants up on charges for manipulating the election and worse. It's just overdue. Reading from the top. Facebook has also suppressed the story. Communications Director Andy Stone announced that we are reducing its distribution on our platform as part of our standard process to reduce the spread of misinformation. Fascinating, isn't it? What they call misinformation. The story was eligible to be fact-checked, in quotes. But there has been no update on it since. This is a little bit out of date, this article. It goes back a little while, but it's worth going over some of the points in here. As Matt Taibbi has pointed out, numerous sensationalists, unverified stories have appeared in the mainstream media, from the Steele dossier to the many Russiagate non-bombshells, which later turned out to be untrue. Yet none of these were deemed eligible for Facebook's fact-checking. Facebook is literally one of the cornerstones of the West's ministry of truth, creating a completely fictional reality for their viewers out there. It's absolutely shocking to me how many people still buy it and eat it right up. It's unbelievable. This is one of the most eye-opening things about these last 4 years is how gullible and stupid the general population is. I'm sorry, it has to be said that way. Let's read from the top. Ironically, of course, when Obama was reelected in 2012, Facebook was seen as a force for good. The liberal establishment was excited by the first true, quote, social media election. Social media and big data were making, quote, elections smarter and had restored the soul of politics. I remember them gushing on about all of this. But the election of Trump represented such a system shock that a scapegoat had to be found. Something had to be done about the voters expressing their wrong opinions and reading things that might give them, quote, wrong ideas. There it is, Facebook, Ministry of Truth. I mean, if all of this stuff doesn't wake up the culture, doesn't wake up people to vote against Biden, who is fully supported by all these people, and that's the point, then, I mean, there's no hope. I mean, I know anybody who's been following my material knows that I really believe we're going to have to face the one world government one day, and we need to be prepared for that. But this is proving just how difficult that will be. Let's read this from Breitbart. The Biden Five, the definitive breakdown of one of America's most corrupt families. And he's not exaggerating here. The corruption and the proof has been just coming out like a waterfall. And only places like Breitbart and Fox and a couple of other smaller right-wing sites are even willing to look at the information. All the big tech, all the big mainstream media are trying to suppress it. These links, again, are all in the description. CNN, this is from The Hill. CNN won't run pro-Trump ad warning Biden will raise taxes on the middle class. Those of you who joined me with Janice Fiamengo just a couple of days ago on a live stream will know we went over the Biden's platform for women. And my God, the cost just in his platform for women, that is staggering how much money he wants to pour out. And yet they won't run these ads. Let's read this from the top with me. CNN has informed the largest outside group supporting President Trump's re-election that it will not run one of its new ads, saying the ad is false because it warns Democratic nominee Joe Biden will raise taxes on the middle class and implies that Speaker Nancy Pelosi supports socialist policies. I mean, really? This is a surprise to who? That Joe Biden will raise taxes and Nancy Pelosi is a socialist? Oh my God. And this on Breitbart. Joe Biden corruption trends on Google. But Google whitewashes the autocomplete suggestions. This is just one of the tricks in which that Google has been using to sway the electorate. Before I go forward on this, I don't think I screen capped this other article, but if you can probably find it if you look out there. There's a fellow who analyzes Google's alone's influence on the election. And he did an analysis on the 2016 election showing how many millions of votes Google directly swung and influenced. Now, he did an analysis on the data for this present election and found that Google will swing 15 million votes towards Biden by their misinformation, by their tricks like this, by not allowing autocomplete suggestions that might drive people towards positive information about Trump or negative information from Biden. So this is not a small matter. 15 million votes across the country is a huge number of votes. And this same guy who analyzed that, and I'm going to try and find that, and I'll tweet it later, but I'm pretty sure I didn't screen cap it. But this same fellow in his analysis showed that if you took away Google alone, this is just one of the tech companies, Google's alone influence on the last election, then Hillary's would not have had any popular vote advantage over Trump. All of her advantage in what they call the popular vote throughout the US was due to Google's influence alone. Now imagine if you took away Facebook's influence, Twitter's influence, all of these other people who are also, all these other big tech companies who are also pushing for the left. Probably there would have been a bigger landslide the last time. But they're still up to it and they're refining their tricks. And I just hope that the next administration, the Trump administration, can find the wherewithal to investigate them and throw the book at them as heavy as they can. It's got to be illegal, although they say it's not. Maybe they need to make a law, make it illegal, and then go after them. It's certainly not anything to do with democratic principles. Twitter's threats to the Post echo those of authoritarian states, and the media shrugs. This is probably one of the most important points of all of this, that these threats to the Post, this is extraordinary authoritarianism. And the media is not even willing to look at it. The mainstream media, like the New York Times, like the Washington Post. These are supposed to be legitimate journalist organizations, but they are so bought and paid for by the Democratic Party, it's unreal, and by big tech. They're not even looking at these stories. That's what leaves it up to us smaller folks to inform one another of what's really going on. Let's read this quote from the top. Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey explained with an eerie calm that the Post can regain access to its Twitter account anytime it wants, once it deletes a tweet with an image of his company has decided violates its standards. Amazing. Dorsey's words echo the assurances offered writers in authoritarian states that they will be allowed to publish their other scribblings, just so long as they burn the manuscripts the censors find offensive in front of the censors. Totalitarianism writ right large there, and the mainstream media is not batting an eye about it. And this article, this is a National Review, it's worth reading as well. The Biden protection racket, and they're referring to the mainstream media and big tech, which are running interference for Biden and coddling him, protecting him, not asking any embarrassing questions. Let's read this quote here. It's a little bit small, so I'll try and read it out for you. The lettering is a bit small. Much of the press has pronounced the Post story debunked without doing any work to debunk it, and believes as a matter of faith that it is Russian disinformation. Rather, the focus has been reporting on how the Post reported the story, as the press works to discredit media outlets that don't toe the correct political line. You know, just like Woodward and Bernstein did during Watergate. This tendency toward anti-reporting has long characterized Biden coverage. The New York Times took 19 days to cover Tara Reade's sexual assault allegation against him, not waiting to burden its readers with information about a newsworthy charge too quickly. 19 days. And remember, when Kavanaugh was on the stand there defending himself, the media brought every little rumor off the street right up into a major news story without hesitation. And even when they were thrashed down and proven to be lies, the media didn't go back and reanalyze themselves. They just moved on to the next outrageously ridiculous claim as if nobody would notice. And unfortunately, our culture is filled with sheep that won't notice. They just, give me more, give me more. They don't know they're being led to the slaughter. Maybe that's their saving grace. They're too stupid to know that they're being led to a slaughter in our one world government. Here in the Federalist, let's read this title here. Joe Biden's boosters financed his prodigal son's entire career. This is worth reading. They go into detail about how every step of the way, Joe Biden's team orchestrated and got Joe Biden every one of his positions, not one of which he earned. Not one. Hunter Biden was a useless, drug-using playboy. And his father's connections got him everything. Worth reading there, folks. Okay, we're going to go into the final stretch here. And let's have a look at this article. The New York Times is saying early votes near 100 million as turnout heads towards a record. As of Monday, more than 95 million Americans have already voted, over 2/3 of 2016's total. Some states are still holding early voting. This is a big election. Everybody knows it. And I am certainly hoping that the majority of it is going to Trump and a landslide. President Trump vowed to mount a legal challenge in Pennsylvania. Joe Biden said the president is not going to steal this election. Now, this is their second point. Notice how they're putting this right up front here, implying that Trump is not going to accept a defeat if he's defeated. This is anticipated. This is just trying to smear Trump. This has been, he never said that he would not accept a re-election. I've seen the debunking of that myth. And then trying to imply that somehow Biden is the force standing for democracy in this by stating the president is not going to steal this election. No, of course he's not. He has no intention of. It's you and your friends that are trying to steal this election, you thieving liar. Let's read the last point here. The threats of violence and street demonstrations have marked the last days of the election. Folks, the media, the mainstream media, and the New York Times in particular, they have thrashed their reputation. They are a rag. They are worse than the original Inquirer, who used to run stories about aliens, abductions, and aliens among us, and all the rest of that stuff. The New York Times is no better than that nonsense. These street demonstrations, most of the violence, as you know, has been coming from the left, from the Democrats. And even top Democrats like Pelosi and I forget the other, Maxine Waters, encouraged their Antifa and BLM followers to be violent, suggesting that it was necessary. And then we had that the highway incident where the media reported that Trump supporters surrounded some Biden bus. Well, it turns out that the Biden bus, is what I read afterwards, or the Biden car, was trying to push the Trump supporters off the road, not vice versa. So don't trust anything that comes out of the New York Times. They are part of the Ministry of Truth now. This is the New York Times is the New York Times branch of the Ministry of Truth. Here's what they say here. Trump supporters halted traffic on Sunday in New Jersey, New York, and Virginia, increasingly worrying authorities. The Trump supporters, in every account, have been very well reserved, well self-controlled, very polite. They are rallying and they're excited, but as far as I've ever seen in any of these videos, none of them have initiated violence. And it's quite the opposite. Their opponents, the Antifa, the BLM, the Democrats, have almost in every case that I know of been the initiator of violence. And yet the New York Times, true to its Ministry of Truth crap, is flipping that narrative and trying to point the finger at Trump supporters. I shouldn't be surprised at this, and I'm not surprised, but it's getting really wearisome to see these people try to push this fake narrative all the time, accusing the Republicans and the Trump supporters of what they themselves are doing in spades. Now let's read this headline. What to expect from Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube on Election Day. The sites are key conduits for communication and information. Here's how they plan to handle the challenges facing them before, on, and after. So this is the New York Times plugging free advertisement, promoting Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. I'm surprised they didn't put Google in there, but I guess Google is just a search engine. Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube are all part of the Ministry of Truth. They're all part of the Ministry of Truth, just like the New York Times. It's incredible, the times we live in. Well, one thing we can reassure ourselves with, folks, is that we're not living in boring times. Whatever happens tomorrow, these are interesting times. I still think Trump is going to win. And I hope Trump is going to win. And I hope we can use the next 4 years to prepare for the next onslaught of these one world government, socialist, communist tyrants and get prepared for them, because they are not going to go away. But if Trump doesn't win, then we're going to be heading straight for even faster towards the creation of this socialist one world government nonsense. If Trump wins, they're going to be violent. They have been as violent even before this, but these idiots are going to make a civil war almost unavoidable. And that's who they are. That's who we're dealing with. Dealing with George Orwell's worst nightmare. And all the media like the New York Times and these big tech giants like Facebook and Google and Twitter and YouTube, they're just the Ministry of Truth. Who would have guessed that George Orwell would be so spot on? Who would have guessed? Anyways, folks, that's all I've got for you today. So I'll wrap it up with, as usual, well, first of all, thank you so much for joining me on Coffee with Steve. I hope you got something out of this. I do encourage you to have a look at those links in the description. Some of those articles are very well written, and they give you some insight into what's going on. There's a lot more detail in there than I can possibly cover in such a short period of time. So also, don't forget to do something you love today, and do it every day. No matter how bad things get, this is your life. You have every right, even an obligation, to enjoy it. So if you don't have something you love to do every day, find something you love to do and do it. So with that, thanks to you once again for joining me on Coffee with Steve. And I remind you that tomorrow at, I believe it's 11 a.m. Eastern Time or Atlantic Savings Time, we have Aaron Pizzi with me. Aaron, as you probably know, single-handedly started the women's shelter movement around the world, what is now the global women's shelter movement. She started it with her refuge in Chiswick, England, a suburb of London, in 1971. She's also a prolific author, written 20-something novels, and a stalwart, an icon of the anti-feminist and men's rights activist movement. Don't miss it. Erin is always insightful, one of the most compassionate and sincere people that I have ever met. So 11 a.m. tomorrow on Coffee with Steve, we'll have Aaron Pizzi on. So long, folks, and have a good evening.